Hey everybody, welcome to my video on this incredible reading that we were able to do this week, Us and Them, using social identity theory to explain and re-envision teacher-student relationships in urban schools. So I would say that of all the readings that we've done in both of our classes that we're taking this semester, this one hit home the most for me. And this caused me to be the most introspective about both my practice as a teacher, but also how I was taught to be a teacher in my credential program. I see a lot of things in myself when I read through this, and that's not really a good thing. It's not a good thing at all, but it's something that I'm acknowledging. So I actually had my partner, he is also a teacher at the high school I teach at. I had him read this too because I just genuinely thought that it was that important that we be more metacognitive, which I love that word. I think we all love that word. Be more metacognitive about the type of culture that we create in our classroom and how our identity is going to impact our relationship with our students. That's arguably the most important thing that we're going to learn about throughout this program too. And I think that's how I'm going to become a better teacher. So I wanted to start out by talking about my experience in my teaching credential program. I went to Humboldt State up in Arcata, California. So very northern up there. And I know Dr. William did too as well. So it'd be interesting to hear her perspective on that credentialing program as well. So when I first interviewed for the program, they did start out by asking me, they said, so about 70-something% of teachers are from white middle-class backgrounds. How do you plan on relating to your students that are not from the same background? And that was the first time I had ever been asked something like that. It's the first time I'd ever really thought about how I would relate to my students. I was very naive, thinking like, I love science, therefore anyone that I speak to is going to love science. And so I was really impressed with that interview question, and I was like, great, this is going to open my eyes to so many things. And the program itself just didn't do that. When I was in my student teaching, I was given an honors chemistry class, and every single student in that class was white. And I was given a college prep anatomy and physiology class, and all but 2 students in that class were white. So as this reading talked about what teacher preparation programs should look like, I just kept shaking my head, and I was saying, nope, that's not what I'm experiencing at all. I'm trying to find the part where it says what some of these programs should look like. So it says there should be multiple contextually distinct practicum experiences during teacher training, because while we can get to know students through non-traditional means, knowing your practice can only happen in an instructional setting. Ideally, at least one of your student teaching placements would take place in a school setting that is drastically different from a teacher's own K through 12 experience. That was not the case for me at all. I actually struggled a lot with doing my, it was called PACT. It was basically a big project we had to do where we had to design like lessons, look at how we were supporting our English learners, our students with IEPs, all that stuff. I actually really struggled because I did not have any students that were designated as English learners, and I did not have any students that were on IEPs. I literally did not go to an IEP meeting until I was hired as a teacher. My first one was my first year teaching. And just looking back on how common having students that are learning English are in my classroom, and having students with IEPs, I mean, it's a third at least of my students are English learners in each of my classes, aside from my honors classes, which I will talk about later. And probably about a fifth of my students are on IEPs or 504 plans. So my teaching credential program experience was not what it should have been. And it was heavily focused on methods, heavily focused on just these standards that I needed to learn. So the next generation science standards. I mean, I just spent hours and hours and hours learning about how to incorporate those standards into the lesson plans that I had to submit all the time. And, you know, I think if I had just read something like this, just one time, if one of my classes had asked us to look at this, that could have changed things a lot for me. It could have at least gotten me started on the journey that I'm on now a lot sooner. And that's what my students deserved, definitely. So not super thrilled when I look back on my teaching credential program. It's just not following any of these stuff that Manya Whitaker is suggesting to help us be more introspective, to help us be metacognitive about how we're going to relate to our students and what our expectations are going to be of our students. I did not receive that. And I think that I was incredibly lucky to be placed at Cordova High School. It's very diverse, but I would not say that I was prepared properly for it. And that makes me sad. But I think I'm on my way now. I'm really grateful for this program. And just as I was reading this, you know, and I think a lot of times we think about what our career is going to be in the future. Do I want to be a teacher forever? Or is there somewhere that I'm just going to want to switch things up? And recently I've been thinking it might be really, really great to one day, way down the road, teach in a college of education. So instead of just teaching high school, which don't get me wrong, I love, I think a huge way to make an impact is to teach people that are in teacher preparation courses and to make sure that they don't leave a program that I'm a part of. Like, I left my program because that is contributing to some major issues that I see at my school, that I see in education in general, is we're not being prepared properly. So this just kind of gave me a little, hey, maybe when I'm in my late 40s or 50s, that could be a direction that I want to take once I obviously have more experience under my belt. So this made me really excited to think about how I can use my education in the future to continue to make changes in education in general. I think one of the hardest parts about this reading is going through it and hearing echoes of staff meetings in my ear as I go through some of these things that Manya Whitaker is explaining and critiquing. So at my staff meetings, it's so much complaining, and especially right now, there are a lot of behavior problems that are going on, but the way that we're talking about our students is almost like they're animals. I've actually heard the term feral used this year, and you know, I think people are coming from a place of like, these students haven't been socialized super well because of COVID, so it's like they're feral animals. But I always just thought that was a really gross way to describe our students, and more so than anything, it's a way to other them. I mean, historically, groups in power have compared groups that they are seeking to oppress, they've compared them to animals, and that's just something that's really bothering me. It's something I don't speak up enough about. It's more because I feel frustrated with behavior problems too, but you know, next time I hear a colleague say something like that, I need to speak up and talk about my issues with that, because this whole idea of an us versus them mentality is so strong right now. It kind of feels like we're that teachers are at war with their students, and Whenever I talk with other teachers about how they're doing right now in this crazy school year, so much of it is about the kids and just how it's not really going super well. And I want to kind of try to remove myself from that way of thinking about children right now, because it gets really dangerous, and it gets really, for lack of a better word, like yucky. It's just not a good feeling, especially when you're wanting to help impact some change this year. So something that we really see at Cordova is higher rates of suspension for our students of color. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but white teachers are more likely than teachers of color to recommend suspension or expulsion for Black students. Manya Whitaker cites a couple authors for that. And less likely than teachers of color to refer students of color to academically gifted programs. So at Cordova, we have an incredibly diverse population, but our staff does not reflect that whatsoever. And I was just talking with some of my students about this, and it's very noticeable. The students notice this as well. So we have all of these white teachers that are not doing any work to evaluate themselves, to look at their own biases, to look at how their identities are impacting their relationships with their students and the type of culture that they're building. 99% of the teachers I work with are totally unwilling to do that. And it shows. It shows in our suspension rates. It shows in the relationships with teachers. I have several times I've had students, kind of complain just offhandedly about a certain teacher, and I'm like, yep, that makes sense. It's usually kind of the same key players. And as I was talking about on last Thursday, teachers do have strength in their tenure, and even our problematic teachers are incredibly hard to get rid of. So they stick around and they keep being problematic, and I don't really know a way around that. I know that Dr. William was talking about catching these people that are entering schools, like maybe in their teacher preparation program, before they become credentialed teachers, before we basically let them into schools. But then I think about my own experience in the credential program, and it wouldn't have caught anybody. It just wouldn't have. So I think that our credentialing programs need a big shift. I have heard that Sac State has a great credentialing program, and that students that come out of that program tend to be a little more, I think somebody described it as woke. So I think that's great. Of course, I only have my experience in this little rural college of Humboldt, but I definitely wish that had been different. And I'm sure, especially for a lot of my older colleagues who have not been in a credential program since, I don't know, the 70s for some of them. Maybe I'm actually making them a little bit too old, but it's been a while for them. And I can't imagine that it was better back then than it is now. So we just have a lot of teachers that are angry with students and that have poor relationships with students, especially our students of color. And they're saying it's them, it's their behavior, it's who raises them, it's their values. And they're never saying, like, what if it's me? What if it is how I approach them? What if it's the culture that I created? Teachers are not doing that, and they have to. And it's an ugly experience. It doesn't feel good when you look at yourself and you say, wow, what I did was harmful. The way that I am viewing that student is harmful. It's not fun to do, but it is necessary. It's so necessary. I cannot stress that enough. And this is something that, at least with my friends who are teachers that work at my school, I'm literally going to be passing this off to them on Monday to read, because I think it's that important. And yeah, that was quite a rambling, but it's definitely something I'm concerned with, is how much my colleagues other our students, and just how damaging this is, and how can I possibly ask a 60-year-old man who's very entrenched in his ways to examine his own biases, to call out his own racism, to look at how he thinks about his students and how that might not be okay. I don't know how to do that, and that's part of why I'm in this program, is to learn. Okay, so I am trying to wrap it up now. I know that I rambled quite a bit, even though I tried to plan to be shorter, but I do talk a lot. I'm sorry. But Manya Whitaker, she quoted Lisa Delpit, who wrote a really fascinating paper. I was reading through some of it online earlier. But she quotes her when she said, "Those with power are frequently least aware of, or at least willing to acknowledge, its existence." So that willingness to acknowledge one's power, and I don't mean power in the feminist power sense, it's the dangerous type of power that dominates over other people and oppresses them. We have to be willing to acknowledge that and see that in ourselves, at least as white teachers, because what this entire paper, this entire article went through, is how white teachers working in urban schools are not being effective, and they're not looking at why they're not being effective. And you just have to do that if you're going to be working in an urban school. If you're going to be working anywhere as a teacher, you have to look inside and figure out who you are, how that's going to impact your relationship with your students. And this needs to be one of the first things that we learn in our credential program. And oftentimes it's entirely forgotten. I would love to look more at other credential programs and see the type of classes and readings that they are taught. Because again, in my experience, everything that Manya Whitaker outlines for what a teacher preparation program should be, most of that I did not receive. So I am so grateful to be receiving that education right now. And yeah, thank you for watching, and again for listening to me ramble on for so long. But this article was my favorite so far, and it made me feel a little bit ugly sometimes, in a good way. It made me uncomfortable in a way that, if you're trying to improve yourself, you're supposed to feel uncomfortable. So really glad that I read it, and it's definitely given me a lot to think about as far as what I want to research, possibly looking at selection for gifted programs and how there are differences among students of color, especially our Black and brown students, or possibly where I want to take my career as a teacher of teachers, that maybe I could make an impact there. So really love the reading, and thank you for watching.